So I've been playing a lot of cEDH. I've been playing the game for about 3.5 years now, and I've always kind of skewed more towards this kind of format. If you've seen any of my other videos, you'll definitely know this, how I talk about interaction, how I talk about land counts and life totals. It's kind of always led to this point. And today we'll be talking about the ways that cEDH has shaped and overall changed how I view Casual Commander. Before we really get into the three kind of big topics that I'd like to discuss about Casual Commander and how cEDH has changed them, I want to just talk about cEDH as a whole. Many people from the outside looking in see cEDH as a very sweaty format. A format where you go and everyone is just there. It's super cutthroat. They're all just trying to win. They're trying to jam the same two combos that exist, which is some way of infinite mana, draw your deck, or Thassa's Oracle, Demonic Consultation. And while that isn't necessarily untrue, it's not a hostile environment like most people might think. I found nothing but acceptance, friendship, and a ton of fun to be had in the cEDH communities that I am a part of recently. And in fact, I'm actually attending my first tournament this Saturday. Everyone is super welcoming. Everyone is there to get better at the format. And one of the best things that I like about cEDH is the fact that you don't really got to worry about any Rule Zero conversation. Pretty much the only Rule Zero conversation that exists is what commanders are you playing, and in which case you can kind of determine this is how they're going to try to win the game. There's an Obnixious player. Well, that person's going to try to win it through some sort of combo with maybe like a Walking Ballista Agatha Soul Cauldron, but they're also going to be a threat to everyone's life total because of the fact they're going to be pinging a lot of players. A Tymna Thrasios deck. Obviously, it's just like any other casual go-wide deck, but they utilize that in a very different way. They utilize their wide board to get card draw out of their Tymna, and they also utilize that for their Gaia's Cradle, which makes them a ton of mana and makes the games extremely grindy. Then you get to a deck like mine, Tevish Thras, which is definitely more of a turbo Gaia's Cradle game plan. All you're trying to do is make a ton of mana and utilize Gaia's Cradle to its fullest effect. In this category, you also have Rograk Thrasios and Yoshimaru Thrasios. Tevesh Thrasios is by far the weakest, but I like it the most because Sultai is probably my favorite 3-color combo. Next, you got the classic mid-range decks of Tymna Kraum, as well as a Kinnan Bonder Prodigy. Kinnan is kind of a mix between that Turbo Gaia's Cradle plan and mid-range game plan, but Kinnan is just a really good commander with a 1-card win condition in its own deck, which is pretty good if you ask me. Tymna Kraum is by far the king and queen of mid-range though, as you get so much card advantage from your commanders and you're in possibly the best 4 colors that you could possibly be in to just kind of sit there and accrue value. And lastly, you have the turbo decks like Lumra, which is an extremely awesome and interesting and very unique, essentially Amulet Titan in Commander. You're going to sack all your lands, you're going to recur them, sack them again, recur them, and you're just going to have a lands combo. Then you've got cards like Ral, which is a crazy storm deck where you manually storm off, eventually you flip your Ral, and you basically just win from there. And lastly, the kings of Turbo is Rograk Silas, which is a Grixis Turbo pile that just kind of tries to win on turn 2 or 3. But I'm actually going to stop here because that is a huge misconception of what cEDH actually is. I just listed some of the best tournament decks out there, but cEDH doesn't have to be tournament staple decks that are looking to win a tournament. Even my deck, Tevesh Thras, is not really all that popular. In fact, there are some decks that would barely be considered cEDH that are actually more entered than Tevesh Thras. cEDH is not necessarily a commander. It usually is a deck and a game plan. At least that's how I've come to see it. A lot of the factors that actually end up determining a cEDH deck is really just how you want to win and how efficient you are at doing so. And another reason why you can consider one deck cEDH and another deck not cEDH is not by how fast they win, whether it's on turn 4 or turn 5 or even as early as turn 2. It's usually just the accumulation of the actual cards utilized in the deck. If you see a card like Mox Diamond, Lion's Eye Diamond, a Smothering Tithe with an Esper Sentinel, and you see cards like Grim Monolith, a lot of these cards just don't really have a place in casual settings, as they are just incredibly powerful. In a lot of cases, surprisingly, if you have a very concise and simple way to win the game, and you have extremely powerful cards to back it up, you could probably take at least a game or two off of a cEDH pot. Really, cEDH is just a fun format to participate in, and still can see a lot of growth if more people get into it. But now that we have the background of cEDH in mind, I want to talk about the 3 different ways that it has really shaped how I view casual Commander. When I first started the channel, Rule 0 was a huge thing. It actually was my most popular video by far. And I had a huge issue with a certain Urza player that went to my LGS that would just kind of play Urza no matter what the pod was asking for. That's back when brackets didn't exist, power level was apparently all 7s, and you really were just kind of in the Wild West of Commander. Nowadays though, I think the bracket system actually is pretty dang good at determining what deck is which and how powerful it is. And oftentimes now, because players have a little bit easier time seeing how powerful cards actually are and having that card evaluation given to them with cards like Game Changers and the bracket system, you can honestly just look at a deck and see what bracket it is just by looking at all 99 cards plus the commander. And that is the first point I want to talk about. It's card selection. Oftentimes in my early days when I was making decks for this YouTube channel, card selection was kind of iffy. Sometimes you'd see a deck that I'd make that has an incredibly powerful card that would be considered a game changer nowadays, and it'd be surrounded by a bunch of not so powerful cards. It led to this deck not only being inconsistent because of how reliant it might be on those 1 or 2 powerful cards, it also would warp the games and lead to bad play experiences. Now that I'm at a point where I see the powerful cards, I play with them often, and I see why they are so backbreaking in other formats, when you get to casual Commander, it's pretty easy to just leave those cards out. And speaking of card selection, strategy selection is also a big thing. While I do still like having combo decks in casual Commander, they typically find a way to try to muscle out the combo rather than just tutor out the combo or find some sort of cheap way to get there. Other strategies that aren't combo could be like aristocrats. That's not really gonna fly in a cEDH setting, but that kind of makes me think, well, I should always build it in a casual way. Does this mean that you need to build a bad deck on purpose in casual Commander? Absolutely not. Does it mean you need to include a Smothering Tithe and a Necropotence in your bracket 2 or 3 Aristocrats deck? Definitely not. This kind of card evaluation and card selection has really improved my games when I enter more casual tables, and has led to not only more consistent gameplay experiences, but also more fun gameplay experiences. The next topic that has really changed over my course of playing cEDH going into casual Commander is interaction. Interaction is an extremely popular topic to discuss within the EDH community. Some people think you should run a ton, some people think you shouldn't run any at all. MTG Goldfish, they are on maybe 1 to 2 removal spells in their entire deck, whereas you might see other people that say, kind of like me, that you should run 12 to 16 bits of interaction. And this is how it's changed for me. I think that having around 12 to 16 pieces of interaction might be a little overkill, but I don't think it's necessarily bad. In a cEDH deck, you see a lot of counter spells that are able to stop your opponents from doing things. You see a lot of extremely efficient and extremely valuable single target removal spells. And you see a lot of free. If I'm gonna lose a card, it better be free or it better be unable to be stopped. Because I play green-black, Abrupt Decay is an incredible include in the deck that I have because it can't be countered. The same goes with Fierce Guardianship because my commander is so cheap, as well as Deadly Brolic. Force of Will is, yes, a 2-for-1 that's bad for me, but it makes sure that that spell does not resolve. Force of Negation is the same thing, but it exiles it off the stack, which means they can't recur it later. A lot of these extremely powerful counter spells are great because of their multifaceted use. The same goes with stacks in something like Winota or Magda, and the same goes for green and white that have can't be countered clauses or that have a lot of silence effects. Interaction is incredibly present in cEDH, and I think it's amazing. But how I think it should differ from casual is the type of interaction that you run. In my casual decks recently, I've kind of gotten rid of a lot of the single target removal and board wipe removal. I typically have maybe one board wipe total in the deck, and I usually focus on protection spells rather than interruption spells. Now, by interruption, I just mean single target removal, or 2-for-1 removal, or 3-for-1 removal. In casual, I'm much more focused now on just ensuring that I can do my thing and my deck cannot be stopped, because then I know that I can win on turn 7 or 8, which is a relatively normal turn cycle. Sometimes winning on turn 6 does happen, sometimes even as early as turn 4 when I accidentally top deck my win condition in my Rocco deck. Things like that certainly can happen, but that's just the inconsistent nature of EDH in general, which I'm okay with, by the way. It's just that recently I've only really decided to include protection over my stuff rather than removal for my opponent's things. I maybe run 1 to 2 very broad removal spells like a Generous Gift or a Beast Within, or something extremely efficient like Swords to Plowshares in my decks nowadays. And I run still a ton of interaction, but it's just to protect my stuff. So while interaction still does exist and I like being interactive at the table, I'd rather have stuff that just protects my own things and just kind of continue from there. It's also a lot more in line with the playstyle I enjoy anyways, which is a highly interactive on the stack style, but just make sure that my threats keep going. Very high tempo style, very aggro control style. And the last of my views that have really changed from playing a lot of cEDH is my thoughts on life totals. Now, I'm going to be the first one to admit that the life total video that I made is not the best. I think I didn't really explain myself super clearly in a video like that, and I think the way that I framed it was also wrong. In the video, I framed it as your life total is not a resource, but when you actually watch the video, what I'm kind of talking about is that people are a bit too lackadaisical on how much they care about it. Most people are okay with shocking themselves or bolting themselves for mana. A lot of people are okay with just taking a bit of chip damage here and there, and in casual settings, that adds up a lot, and I'm kind of advocating against that. And if I'm being totally honest, that has kind of stayed the same. At the end of the day, especially in casual, having more life than your opponents will be a target, yes, but it will also be an advantage to you. Most casual games end with combat damage. So if you have more life, if you have a higher stat total than your opponents in that category, I think it will be better. Where that differs from cEDH is the fact that your life total almost never matters until it does. In cEDH, Ad Nauseam, Necropotence, and Peer into the Abyss all exist, and they are all completely normal strategies. Of course, Black is going to utilize this as best as possible, but there are some other colors that don't necessarily care about life total either. If you're in something like a Tali, a Treasonous Ogre is also incredible for you. So your life total definitely is a resource in decks like that. Heck, Keurig is the best example of your life total being a resource, as that's the entire point of the deck, is to cheat out the mana for your life total. And when we go back to casual settings, that is actually a big point that I have. I try to emphasize protecting my life total as best as I possibly can, without throwing the game, of course. If I'm going to be swung at by a 24/24 Galta that just got its life total doubled, there's only so much I can do, and I'm going to try to block as best as possible, but commander damage exists for a reason. But in casual settings, not only do I try to avoid shock lands for casual settings sake, I also think that that damage adds up quite a bit over time. Same with pain lands, same with cards that allow you to just pay life into them instead, and it's a big reason why I start running more protection spells instead of removal. While they effectively do the same thing, removing somebody's threat that could potentially go somebody else and damage their life total is always going to be worse than just protecting myself from losing life. All in all, cEDH has been an absolute blast for me to play lately. I really enjoy playing this format. I've pretty much played it non-stop for about 3 weeks now, with a few casual games here and there, and I'm excited for my first tournament this Saturday. The Commander format is incredibly inviting, and I want it to remain that way. If where you live, cEDH is seen as some sort of sweaty or toxic thing, I really encourage you to try to change that in your community, or at least try to find some people that aren't that way. And if people are being dumb or being rude, you can always just ignore them and try to find some games online through Spelltable. It's really helped me change my view on casual Commander, as well as just enjoy the format even more. So I hope it's been at least somewhat convincing for you to try out cEDH yourself, and I'd love to hear what your thoughts are in the comments below. Thank you guys all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys all next time.